Hi, everyone. My name is Jude Dry. I write for Indiewire, and I'm pleased to introduce the filmmaker Iris Sachs and co-writer Mauricio Zacharias. So please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you.
Glad to have you guys here. So I guess I'll just start with a softball opening question. How did the idea for this script come to you both, and how did you come together to work on it?
Mauricio and I had done two other films previously. The first was called Keep the Lights On, which was about two men and their relationship over 10 years, and those men were in their 20s. We made another film after that called Love is Strange, about two men in their 60s and 70s, John Lithgow and Alfred Molina. And when we finished Love is Strange, it felt like there was a third film to be made about the third generation, about kids. So we really set out to make a kids film, but from the perspective of being adults and being sort of knowing experience of both generations, and to make a mature film about childhood that was dealing with the issues in a way that it felt full to us as filmmakers.
Also, at the same time, when we were making Love is Strange, Ira became a dad, and he became a dad of twins. So I think that also sparked a little bit his desire to make a film with kids.
It's interesting. I think most filmmakers make their childhood coming of age story, up front. It's so interesting to come to it now at this stage in your career.
I did that too.
Right.
My first film was about a teenager in Memphis, which is where I grew up. But I think this, every film for me is about a journey and a discovery, and it has to be some sort of awakening for the characters that occurs in the course of the film. So there isn't so much difference in lots of ways. I mean, working with these actors was an interesting and wonderful experience. People always say that working with kids is supposedly so difficult, and I actually, and no offense to the adult actors in the room, but it was one of the easiest experiences that I've had as a director, because they're very, very free with what they're good at.
Can you elaborate on that? Is there they not have, I imagine, years of fear of rejection and trauma?
Well, I think ultimately when you cast a film, you're casting people and not just actors, and you're trying to find people. I almost never cast anyone who I think isn't already, as soon as I meet them, perfect for the role. So I never want someone to transform so much. I think there was some sort of concern that I would find that working in them was different, but really what I liked about their acting was their perceptiveness and their emotional intelligence as human beings, and that maintained itself. So even if I might had to adapt to some extent the language that I used, that was very natural to them, to be attentive and to listen and to be comfortable with some version of themselves. I will say specifically these two actors, as a director, I had an idea of them that was, I took notice that they were very different, and I thought of one of them, and you can guess which, as a Scorsese actor, and I thought of the other one as an actor from a film there's a French filmmaker, Robert Bresson, and Bresson uses the actor as a model, meaning he just wants the actor to be, and that somehow in his being, you sense what's going on underneath, but very little movement. And I knew with these two actors that I needed to work with them in that way.
That's interesting that you say that, because the second description is, to me, is much closer to an Iris Sachs film, is an actor who is just being. So it's interesting, and I know Michael Barbieri has been sort of like the breakout. Everyone was talking about his performance when the movie first came out. it's fun to see this sort of character actor in an Ira Sachs film. I think we don't see that often.
Well, I would actually say he was just being like he is, which is quite performative. So his natural state was what I was looking for, and he's an entertainer, and so I think that's part of the quality of who he is as a person. I mean, to me, the same thing happens with Greg Kinnear, where I really wanted, or I think of John Lithgow, for example, in Love is Strange. Both those actors, as soon as I met them, I was like, this is the person I want to see on film. And can we try to let that person out, to bring as much of that person to the screen as possible.
Interesting. I want to get Mauricio in here, but I didn't realize that you had written all three of those films together. If you could cast back, I mean, how has your writing process together changed over the three films, and what, if anything, is sort of the core that remains the same?
We have pretty much the same method of creating those scripts. We start with an idea, and I'll come to the idea for this one again, because there's an interesting story of how it came to be, how it became the story you guys saw. But we usually start with an idea, like a basic idea, the main characters, and then we start meeting, and we meet and just chat and talk about actually what's going on in our lives. You know, we watch movies, and we talk a lot, and we start creating a set of characters and situations. And from that, we start to create the story, and we create the whole story together. We outline the story together, and then I go out on my own and I write a first draft, and then I send the first draft to him, and he edits, and then I write some more. He writes a little bit, and and then it goes back and forth like this until it becomes pretty much what he shoots. He doesn't change much from what we have on the page. About this last one, about Little Man, so he wanted to make a film, Ira wanted to make a film about kids. I felt a bit intimidated by the idea. So we started watching, movies. We started seeing, what was the
World of Henry
the World of Henry Orient, which was, I had never seen it, and he brought it to me, and I thought it was really wonderful. And then we started talking about what was going on at that time. So we started out with this idea of a great friendship, almost like a first crush friendship between two guys. And at that same time, there was I'm from Brazil originally, and there was this huge drama going on in Rio with my family, which is basically the store part of the drama that you saw. My father owns the store in Ipanema, and the tenant simply stopped paying rent all of a sudden, and she gave no reason, and she was friendly with all of us, and I knew her daughter, and one day she just stopped paying rent. And my father, at that same moment, he started getting sick. He wasn't well, and he couldn't deal with it. So all of a sudden we had to be, we didn't know how to do, we had to deal with it. And it was a very, very complex situation, because we really didn't know what to do. And throw this woman out, or so it was getting, every time I would come over, there was a new piece of information about it. And I one day was like, wait a minute, this is the story that we should.
It was specifically when he told me that one day he went by and they were about to go to court. It had been going on for a year, much longer than this, and they were about to go to court the next day, and there was a sign in the window that said "Help Wanted." Right. And I thought, oh my God, what a, and I think instantly, even while I was listening to Mauricio empathetically as a friend, and I was also like, there's two sides of this story, obviously. And I think that was something as writers, we really wanted to not pit them too far apart from each other. So the tenant is the immigrant character is not just arriving in America. They're very similar sort of education class. They're both struggling for the middle class in lots of ways. And I think that makes the film, it actually gives the film a moral suspense. You're not sure where to identify.
And then you said it in Brooklyn, and this sort of pallor of gentrification is there without you needing to state it explicitly.
The pallor of gentrification is there in any city, almost in the world, I would say, maybe particularly in cities. So I find that this question of economic disparity and how it affects a neighborhood and how it affects a corner and how it affects neighbors, you know, just look at this building and what's next door to it and how to, you know, it's everywhere. So I think our job is, as filmmakers and New York filmmakers, just try to be very specific and get the details right. And if we do that well, then it will be, I wouldn't even say universal, it will just be relevant.
I asked you guys before, but Mauricio is Brazilian, and I don't know where your ethnic background is, but
Jewish from Memphis, Tennessee.
Jewish, okay. So I was wondering if the kids were at least, you know, little stand-ins for you guys and your friendship, at least.
I said no. He said yes.
Well, I would have said no because I hadn't really thought about it. But I will say that these relationships across difference and across. My husband is from Ecuador. My co-writer's from Brazil, my editor's from Brazil, my script supervisor is from Romania, one of my major financiers from Greece, and you know, so I think the cinematographer is from Spain, and I think that speaks to a certain organic affinity I have with non-American people and non-American films. Actually, I would say the relationship to this kind of filmmaking I find is also not about just being here. So I think that's the similarity. My husband actually came from Ecuador when he was 10 with a single mom. He went to LaGuardia High School for Performing Arts as a painter. And so again, we try to sort of naturally bring in the stories we're very familiar with.
When we were, you know, talking about the script in that early phase of the partnership to start writing this, that's when we watched Gloria, and was, you know, I think I watched it first and I showed it to Ira, and we actually wrote the part for Paulina, for the actress, because Gloria is a Chilean film with Paulina Garcia, and she had won.
Not the Cassavetes film, though it was named after the Cassavetes film.
Yeah. It's actually probably 2014, 13. She won the Best Actress Award in Berlin, and we just thought she was wonderful, and we decided to try and see if she would, you know, agree to make it. We actually wrote it thinking of her for this character, for this part, and she said yes. We sent the script and she said yes.
And for me, the performance that she gives, Paulina Garcia, in the film, she'd never worked in America, she'd never worked in English, so that was an interesting challenge for her. And there's something about the performance, and again, since this is a room, I'm guessing, of a lot of actors, I find it one of my favorite in the films that I've made, because it is, it's both very, very natural, but it's also very theatrical. And the ability to sort of play both those lines as an actress and as an acting style and as an aesthetic, I think makes it, there's something strange about the performance. And I think that's ultimately what makes it memorable.
Yeah, she's sort of mysterious. And then I find myself very sympathetic to her until the moment when she says the thing about, you know, your father wanted you to be a man, and that really turned her character, I thought, to something really darker there.
I don't think I think that one of the, because it's a film also about, you know, gentrification, I think to make the tenant completely sympathetic would be very easy. You know, she's the one who's suffering, and I think it gives her strength, and it makes the their fight more interesting. That she has.
I will also say
strengths.
that she and I were kind of in agreement that we didn't want to soften her too much because we loved her. You know, we really felt that she was someone who was pushed into a corner and made the choices that she felt she needed to make, unsuccessfully, by the way. But that somehow to soften her would be not to respect her or find her as human as we wanted to.
Since we are in a room full of mostly actors, the acting class scene went over very well, as you can imagine. How do you write, you know, an exercise like that? Was that a one case of improvisation, or was that all written?
Well, you know, I'm a fiction filmmaker, and I would say 85% of this film is fully scripted, but in all my work and the work we've done together, about 15% I create knowing that it will be improvisational, and I think it feeds into the film in a particular way, and it gives a texture to the whole film because you have this play between the real and the constructed. So that scene, actually, we wrote the script that the character was going to be practice capoeira, Brazilian martial arts. And once we met Michael Barbieri, who did not happen to practice capoeira, and I sent him to a couple of classes, and he was terrible. And it turned out he'd been studying at Strasbourg since he was 8, and I said, well, let me go with you to a Strasbourg class, and we went, and it just seemed like a more natural art form for him. So then we said, and I also grew up in a children's theater in Memphis. I was very involved, so that was a world that I knew better than capoeira also. And then the acting coach is actually his teacher, so they have known each other for many years. Again, for this particular audience, we shot that. The teacher is at Strasbourg, but we were actually using Meisner as the technique, so that was our subversive. But I thought Meisner somehow, I knew that the repetition exercise would make for good improv, and it did. That scene, we probably shot for 2 or 3 hours. We shot an acting class. I gave them those particular things to do, but not their lines. And then you see bits and pieces of what happened. I will tell you 2 things about Michael. One is, since we screened this film a year ago today, it premiered at Sundance just like 12 months ago. Since then, he's done a movie with Matthew McConaughey, and he's in the new Spider-Man, and he's now 14, which is great that he's had this kind of rush of experience. But most importantly, he was accepted to LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts, where he is now a freshman. So
Where Nicki Minaj went.
Where Nicki Minaj went, and Al Pacino, I hear.
I also loved the dancing scene. I just saw like the gay club imagery there. I just thought it was so hilarious to put these kids in this club scene, and such a classic cinematic, you know, thing. And then you're putting it with 13-year-old kids. I mean, that must have been.
But that you do have here in New York a club for kids on Sunday afternoons. You know, I have a friend whose good friend used to organize, or she still does. I mean, she used to be a film commercial producer, and she started doing it, and it was so successful that she became like full-time. That's all she did.
But that's true.
Not very far from here.
The thing about that scene, which was kind of amazing, even as I was shooting it, is that it reminded me of Bugsy Malone, if anyone remembers that movie, which was a movie, it was a genre film about gangsters in the 1930s, but it was all kids. So every single person, Jodie Foster is in the film as a kid. And there was something about, as we were shooting that, I could have been shooting like a French film in the 90s about like cool hipsters, but actually they were 12 and under. I knew I was playing with something artificial, and that would be part of the pleasure of that.
We had a question from the audience about the casting process, particularly around the kids. I know you.
you know, I think early on, I work with a wonderful casting director named Avi Kaufman, and she's done a lot of kids. So she did The Sixth Sense, and she did Searching for Bobby Fischer, and she did The Ice Storm, and she did Life of Pi, and so she found all those kids, and she's really got a knack for it. But very early on, I knew that I wasn't looking for like a needle in a haystack. I wasn't looking for Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz. It didn't need to be someone who could do everything in the world. I just needed to find kids that I was interested in and that the audience I thought would be, which was good. So we ended up probably seeing a couple, you know, maybe 150 kids, not 1,000 kids. And as soon as we saw one we liked, we cast them. And Theo came through an agent in Los Angeles, submitted a tape, and it was like a documentary of the kid we'd written. So it was just like, go with that guy, he's amazing. And then Michael came to an open call. We put a sign up at Strasbourg, and he saw it, and he came to an open call. And again, I just felt instinctually that he would be interesting to watch, and he was. They both were.
I know you teach film occasionally.
Yes.
I guess to sort of adapt this question from an actor's audience, but how do you as a creative balance, you know, gigs that maybe are more steady paychecks and teaching and things like that with creating your personal work?
I quit teaching once I had more work as a director, because I think it is very hard to balance. That being said, in the years that I taught, which was maybe 5, it was extremely rewarding and inspiring in terms of having that conversation and kind of flow of ideas. And it put me in a world of artists and people thinking about the things that I wanted to be thinking, which as a filmmaker, like an actor, you're not always doing. Sometimes you're just conceptually doing it. So I found it very rewarding. I will say one thing about acting, just because I don't rehearse with my actors. By strategy and experience, I have found probably after my first film, that I sit with a script with all the actors individually, and we go through their scenes and we actually read through the scenes, but I encourage them not to act them at all, because I don't want to hear and I don't want them to make decisions, but we talk about the text and we make sure it's clear and if any changes need to be made. But I don't do any read-throughs, I don't do any table reads. And the reason for that for me is that in film, unlike theater, you only need to do it once, and the course of a production day is a series of rehearsals. I mean, you shoot scenes for many hours, so you're going to do 10 takes this direction, 5 takes this direction. So I block, when I say I don't rehearse, it doesn't mean I don't work with actors, but I block the morning that we're shooting the scene, and I don't try to fix things until ever, really. And I think that's part of the particular quality of performance that I'm looking for. And I will say that many, many film actors who are experienced, A, they really love working that way, and B, they've done it many, many times. Like it's not like I didn't start that way of working. But it's part of what I'm looking for is the unexpected.
That's very, very interesting. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you everyone for coming. It's a wonderful movie.